Hello students, myself Dr. Juniet from St. Xavier's College, Jaipur. I am going to take on the topic of Plasmodium. So members of the genus Plasmodium are collectively known as malarial parasites. It is a febrile disease, meaning which it causes symptoms of fever. Now, how did the word malaria come? It came from the Italian word mal area. It was believed that by breathing in harmful vapors that is emitted from the marshy lands caused malaria. So later on in 1860, a French military surgeon by the name of Charles Lavran, he put an end to this myth. He observed the malarial parasite in the blood of a soldier for the first time. Later on in 1889 in Calcutta, Sir Ronald Ross, he studied about the malarial parasite's connection with the intermediate host and the modes of transmission. It was for this he won the Nobel Prize in 1902. Later on in 1890, Grassi, he provided the scientific relationship between Anopheles mosquito and the human malarial parasite. Now, the Plasmodium parasite, it is digenetic, meaning which it requires two hosts to complete its life cycle. A vertebrate and a blood-sucking invertebrate, which is the female Anopheles mosquito. So, there are two phases. The asexual phase happens in the man, whereas the sexual phase takes place in the female Anopheles mosquito. The four known species that are known to attack man are Plasmodium vivax, Plasmodium malariae, Plasmodium falciparum, and Plasmodium ovale. Now let's start with the life cycle in man. So there is two phases, the pre-erythrocytic cycle which happens in the liver cells and the erythrocytic cycle which happens in the red blood cells. So the pre-erythrocytic cycle, what happens when an infected female Anopheles mosquito bites a person? Thousands of this sickle-shaped sporozoites are injected into the bloodstream. They enter the general circulation and circulate in the blood for about 30 minutes and they enter into the reticuloendothelial cells of the liver. So once they enter the liver cells, by gliding movement, they become structures called as neurozoites. So the nucleus becomes large and there is no cytoplasm or no granules. So they become into structures known as schizons. Now these schizons, they become into forms known as cryptoschizons. The word cryptic means they become buried in the liver cells. The cryptoschizons, they undergo schizogony, meaning which they undergo multiple fission and become into forms known as cryptomerozoites. The merozoites, they are set free in the liver cells. When the liver cells rupture, they are set free in the blood and it invades fresh liver cells or new RBCs. So this cycle, the pre-erythrocytic cycle, is considered as a period of incubation. So for a period of 7 to 17 days, this parasite is not seen in the bloodstream. So this phase is called as the pre-erythrocytic cycle or exoerythrocytic cycle. Now moving on to the second phase, which is the erythrocytic cycle, which happens in the red blood cells. So the merozoite, it feeds on the contents of the RBC and assumes an amoeboid shape. This stage is called as trophozoite stage. The trophozoite then feeds on the hemoglobin content and a vacuole appears pushing the cytoplasm and the nucleus towards the periphery, forming a signet ring stage. Then the trophozoite, it appears like an amoebula and it breaks up into small bits of nucleus surrounded by a small bit of cytoplasm. This stage is called as the schizon stage. Since it looks like rose petals, this schizon stage is also called as a rosette stage. Next, by the rupture of the wall of the RBC, the merozoites along with the hemozoin waste is released and to infect fresh new RBCs. So the release of the toxin hemozoin causes malarial fever. So what happens? The plasmodium, when it feeds on the hemoglobin is made up of two parts, hem and globin, the protein part. So the globin is digested by the plasmodium, whereas the hem, which is toxic to the parasite, it is converted into a form insoluble crystalline hemozoin. It is a disposable product. It is excreted via the urine. So in persons infected with Plasmodium falciparum, this hem is excreted via the urine, causing black water disease or black water fever. So this life cycle, the erythrocytic cycle, was worked out by Golgi, hence it is called as the cycle of Golgi. Now, after schizogony has taken place for several generations, after invading all the liver cells and red blood cells, some of the merozoites, they develop into forms known as microgametocyte and macrogametocyte. Microgametocyte is the male gamete and the macrogametocyte is the female gamete. Now we are going to look at the sexual phase of the parasite, which happens in the female Anopheles mosquito. So when a female Anopheles mosquito bites an infected person, all the stages of the parasite is sucked and only the mature stages will survive in the gut of the mosquito. By the process of exflagellation, the male gamete fuses with the macrogamete by syngamy. Then the zygote formed is called as ookinete. The ookinete exhibits wriggling movement and enters into the stomach wall of the mosquito. It absorbs nourishment, and the oocyst is formed with the ookinete when it develops a cyst-like wall around it. It is called as oocyst. Then the nucleus divides a number of times around each nuclei and a small amount of cytoplasm gets collected. So these cells are called as sporozoites. Now when the mature oocyst ruptures, it liberates the content into the hemocoel of the saliva. So when this infected mosquito goes and bites a new person, that person also gets infected with malaria. That is how the Plasmodium life cycle continues. Now, looking at the symptoms, persons affected with malaria experience fever, chills, joint pain, blood in urine, vomiting, anemia, and seizures. So, measures to control is elimination of mosquitoes and prevention of infection. Quinoline types of drugs are administered to malarial patients. And how do you diagnose a person infected with malaria? By examining blood film. If you observe the RBCs, you can see the stages of the Plasmodium, and by using a rapid diagnostic kit and PCR. So that's all. Thank you.